Dust settles over shattered crystal, while high society elites cower in custom tailoring. Seconds ago, a sister sneered at dirty combat boots. Now, survival hinges entirely on the very soldier she mocked. Prepare for a story where arrogance meets cold, undeniable military reality in the most explosive way possible. Abigail Hayes stood at the periphery of the grand ballroom, her rigid posture a stark contrast to the fluid, champagne-soaked mingling of the elite guests. The Hayes estate, a sprawling mansion nestled in the affluent hills of California, buzzed with the suffocating energy of her father's 60th birthday gala. Chandeliers dripped with Swarovski crystals, casting fractured light across the designer gowns and tailored tuxedos of tech moguls, politicians, and socialites. For Abigail, the opulent setting felt more foreign than the austere deserts of the Middle East or the freezing mountain ridges of Eastern Europe. She wore her pristine dress blues, the medals on her chest neatly arranged, yet she felt entirely invisible. To the Hayes family, Abigail's military career was not a badge of honor. It was a dark stain on their pristine corporate lineage. "Oh, look who decided to descend from the mountains." A shrill, manicured voice echoed over the light jazz playing in the background. Abigail braced herself without turning her head. It was Bianca. Bianca Hayes, Abigail's older sister, glided across the polished marble floor. She was the golden child, the vice president of their father's venture capital firm, and the undisputed jewel of the family. Hanging off her arm was her brand-new fiancé, Gregory Pierce, a Silicon Valley billionaire whose latest cybersecurity firm had just gone public. "Hello, Bianca," Abigail said, her voice steady and modulated. Bianca gestured dismissively toward Abigail's uniform, a condescending smirk playing on her lips. "I'm genuinely surprised you wore that. I told Mother you should borrow one of my old Prada gowns. The brass buttons are a bit aggressive for a civilized evening, don't you think?" "It's my formal uniform, Bianca. I'm on active duty." "I thought Dad would appreciate the respect," Abigail replied, keeping her tone neutral. Years of harsh interrogations and high-stress negotiations had taught her how to mask her emotions, but her sister's casual cruelty still possessed a unique ability to grate on her nerves. Gregory chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal glass. "So, Abigail, right? Bianca tells me you're in the army. Infantry, is it?" "Something like that," Abigail answered vaguely. She had long ago given up trying to explain the complexities of her deployment. Officially, to her family, she was a standard supply logistics officer who occasionally did infantry drills. The truth that she was the commanding officer of an elite, highly classified, Tier 1 Joint Task Force, specializing in unconventional warfare and long-range sniper overwatch, was classified well above anything Gregory's cybersecurity clearance could ever touch. Bianca laughed, a high, tinkling sound designed to draw the attention of nearby guests. Several wealthy investors turned to watch the exchange. "Oh, Gregory, don't try to make it sound glamorous. She's just a grunt. She digs holes, cleans rifles, and takes orders from men who actually went to college. Honestly, Abby, I still don't understand why you didn't just take the internship Dad offered. You're 30 years old, and you're essentially a heavily armed janitor." A few of the eavesdropping guests snickered. Abigail's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She looked at Bianca's hands, soft, unblemished, heavily jeweled. Then she thought of her own hands, calloused from thousands of hours on a rifle stock, scarred from shrapnel in environments Bianca couldn't even point to on a map. "Someone has to do the dirty work, Bianca," Abigail said softly, refusing to take the bait. Their father, Richard Hayes, materialized from the crowd. Silver-haired and wearing a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, he exuded an aura of absolute authority. He kissed Bianca warmly on the cheek, clapped Gregory on the shoulder, and then turned to Abigail. The warmth instantly vanished from his eyes, replaced by a weary tolerance. "Abigail, you made it," Richard said flatly. "Happy birthday, Dad." "I see you wore the costume," Richard sighed, shaking his head. "Try not to talk about the mud in the barracks with the guests, please. We are trying to secure a major merger with Gregory's board tonight. We need an atmosphere of sophistication." "I'll keep to the shadows," Abigail assured him, stepping back. See that you do, Bianca whispered viciously as she brushed past. Just try not to embarrass us. Tonight is about people who actually matter. Abigail retreated to the terrace, letting the cool night air wash over her. She checked her watch, a rugged, tactical piece that stood out against the formal cuff of her uniform. She only had to endure this for 3 more hours. Then she would return to base, where she was respected, where her tactical brilliance was recognized, and where her team, 50 of the deadliest marksmen on the planet, waited for her command. She pulled a secure, encrypted comms device from her inner pocket to check in. Ghost Actual, this is Watcher, a gravelly voice crackled in her earpiece. It was her second in command, Sergeant Miller. Go ahead, Watcher, Abigail murmured into the hidden lapel mic. We are tracking a shift in local chatter. That cartel asset we've been monitoring, he just dropped off the grid, and local intercepts suggest a strike team moved into your grid sector. Be advised, things might get loud. Abigail's posture shifted. The dutiful daughter vanished, replaced instantly by the seasoned operator. Understood, Watcher. Keep your eyes open. I'm unarmed. Strictly social. Roger that, boss. We've got eyes in the sky. Just say the word. Abigail killed the connection. She looked back through the floor-to-ceiling glass doors at her family, laughing, completely oblivious to the real world outside their bubble of wealth. She hoped Miller's intel was just a precaution. But in her line of work, coincidences were rarely just coincidences. The attack began not with a bang, but with complete, suffocating darkness. At 9:45 p.m., the massive crystal chandeliers in the ballroom died, the ambient lighting over the manicured lawns extinguished, the jazz band's amplifiers cut out with a sharp, whining screech. For 3 seconds, there was a collective, confused silence among the 200 elites gathered in the room. Then, the heavy oak doors at the front of the estate exploded inward. The concussive force rattled the high windows. Before the smoke even cleared, men poured into the room. They were fast, silent, and moved with terrifying, practiced efficiency. Through the dim moonlight bleeding in from the terrace, Abigail immediately clocked their gear. Matte black tactical rigs, suppressed compact assault rifles, panoramic night vision goggles, and heavy ceramic plating. These weren't petty thieves or local gang members. They were professional mercenaries. Nobody moves, a voice boomed, magnified by a portable tactical megaphone. Searing white strobe lights suddenly clicked on from the ends of the mercenaries' rifles, blinding the panicked guests and sending them screaming to the marble floor. Abigail was already moving. While her father shouted in indignation and her sister shrieked, Abigail dropped low, blending seamlessly into the heavy velvet drapery lining the perimeter of the room. Her heart rate, which should have been skyrocketing, plummeted to a steady, icy 60 beats per minute. This was her element. "Get down! Hands where I can see them!" the lead mercenary barked. He was a massive man, an ugly scar bisecting his right cheek, completely unbothered by the chaos. He casually fired a single, suppressed round into the ceiling. The muted thwip was followed by a shower of plaster, instantly silencing the screaming crowd. Abigail counted them, 8 in the main room, 2 covering the east exit, 2 guarding the shattered front doors, 12 total visible. But men like this always left a rear guard. "Where is Gregory Pierce?" the leader demanded, pacing in front of the cowering millionaires. "I won't ask twice. Where is the boy genius?" Abigail's eyes darted toward the center of the room. Gregory was trembling violently, trying to hide behind Bianca's expensive gown. Bianca was weeping hysterically, her perfect makeup ruined, clutching her father's arm. "I am Richard Hayes," her father bellowed, trying to stand up, his corporate bravado momentarily overriding his survival instincts. "Do you know who I am? I can pay you whatever you want. Just leave my family out of this." The leader laughed harshly and struck Richard across the face with the stock of his rifle. Richard crumpled to the floor with a groan. "Dad!" Bianca screamed. "Shut up!" the leader snapped, grabbing Bianca by the hair and hauling her to her feet. "You're his fiancée, aren't you? The VP's pretty little sister. If Pierce doesn't stand up right now, I'm going to put a bullet in her perfectly manicured head." Gregory remained glued to the floor, violently shaking his head, too cowardly to surrender himself. Bianca sobbed, her eyes wide with absolute terror, searching the room for anyone to help her. She looked right past the shadows where Abigail was concealed. Abigail knew she had to act. She had no weapon, no armor, and no immediate backup, but she had an unparalleled tactical mind. Slipping off her polished dress shoes, Abigail moved silently down the hallway leading to the catering kitchens, banking on her assumption about a rear guard. She pushed through the swinging door just in time to see a lone mercenary guarding the service exit, his back turned as he monitored the perimeter. Abigail didn't hesitate. She closed the distance in 3 silent strides. Before the mercenary could even register the shift in the air, she struck. She drove the heel of her palm into the base of his skull while simultaneously sweeping his leg. As he dropped, she caught his rifle by the sling, preventing it from clattering against the tile, and wrapped her forearm around his throat in a flawless, blood-choking hold. He thrashed for exactly 6 seconds before going limp. Gasping quietly, Abigail stripped him of his gear. She took his suppressed rifle, 2 spare magazines, a tactical knife, and his communication earpiece. She jammed the earpiece into her own ear, listening to the enemy's tactical chatter. "Kitchen secure," a voice crackled in Russian on the enemy comms. Abigail recognized the accent and the dialect. Spetsnaz, ex-Russian special forces, likely operating as a private hit squad. This was a highly orchestrated extraction, and they were here for the classified military firewall codes Gregory's company had just developed. She tapped her hidden lapel mic, re-establishing her secure link to Miller. "Watcher, this is Ghost Actual," Abigail whispered, her voice colder than ice. "Boss, we have thermal satellites on your position. We see 12 hostiles inside, 6 more outside, setting up a perimeter. They've jammed local police frequencies. What's your status?" "I have a weapon. Hostiles are ex-Spetsnaz contractors. They have my family and 200 civilians hostage. They are threatening to execute my sister." There was a brief pause on the line. Then, the sound of a heavy bolt sliding into place echoed through the earpiece. "Understood, Commander," Miller said, his voice dropping an octave. "Ghost Company is spun up. We are in the transport choppers, 3 minutes out. The snipers are deploying to the high ridges surrounding the estate. Do not engage until I have eyes on the leader," Abigail ordered, checking the chamber of her stolen rifle. "They have explosives rigged to the exits. If they panic, they'll blow the building." "Copy that. We await your mark, boss. Give them hell." Abigail slid the safety off. She took a deep breath, letting the scent of gunpowder and ozone replace the cloying smell of expensive perfume. Her sister had called her a grunt. Her family thought she was nothing but a low-level soldier playing in the dirt. It was time to show them exactly what a Tier 1 commander looked like in the dark. Moving with lethal grace, Abigail slipped out of the kitchen and back toward the ballroom, melting into the shadows. The hunt had begun. Shadows provided the perfect canvas for a predator, and Abigail moved through them with terrifying grace. While the extravagant ballroom remained a chaotic tableau of whimpering billionaires and pacing mercenaries, the perimeter of the estate transformed into a silent hunting ground. Abigail gripped the stolen suppressed rifle, her finger resting lightly against the trigger guard. The heavy weapon felt entirely natural in her hands, a stark contrast to the restrictive fabric of her dress blues. Through the encrypted earpiece, the hostile Russian chatter grew increasingly frantic. Conrad, the scarred leader orchestrating the assault from the center of the ballroom, barked orders to his perimeter guards. He demanded a status report from the kitchen, unaware that his man was currently lying unconscious in a pool of shattered champagne flutes. Abigail slipped into the ornate dining room that flanked the main hall. A lone mercenary stood by the heavy mahogany doors, his panoramic night vision goggles scanning the darkness. He was heavily armored, his finger hovering dangerously close to the trigger of his compact submachine gun. Abigail did not hesitate. Relying on years of grueling close-quarters combat training, she closed the distance with footsteps lighter than dust. Before he could turn toward the subtle shift in the air, she drove the heavy stock of her rifle directly into the nerve cluster at the base of his neck. The mercenary crumpled silently, caught before he hit the ground by Abigail's waiting arm. She lowered him quietly to the plush Persian rug, securing his weapon and spare flashbang grenades. 2 down, 10 remaining inside the immediate blast radius. Kitchen is dark, dining hall is dark, Conrad's voice crackled harshly over the stolen radio frequency. "Perimeter team, tighten the net. Someone is inside the house." Abigail tapped her hidden lapel microphone, switching back to her secure channel with Sergeant Miller. "Watcher, they know they have a leak. Give me a status on those long guns." "Ghost Actual, we are in position." Miller's calm, gravelly voice echoed in her ear. 50 operators have surrounded the estate. Snipers have established overlapping fields of fire from the eastern ridge and the southern tree line. Thermal optics have painted every hostile in the building. We just need a clear line of sight, boss. The heavy drapery is obscuring a clean shot on the leader. "Stand by, Watcher. I will flush him out," Abigail whispered. Back in the ballroom, the atmosphere had deteriorated into pure, unadulterated terror. Conrad paced violently in front of the hostages, his patience entirely exhausted. He grabbed Gregory Pierce by the collar of his expensive tailored tuxedo, hauling the trembling tech billionaire to his feet. Gregory whimpered. His previous bravado entirely vanished, replaced by the pathetic reality of a man who had never faced a genuine threat in his privileged life. "I am out of time, Pierce," Conrad snarled, pressing the hot barrel of his rifle directly against Gregory's temple. "You are going to give me the decryption keys to the military firewall, or I am going to paint this beautiful marble floor with your brains. Then I am going to start executing this lovely family of yours, one by one." Bianca screamed, a ragged, horrifying sound that tore through the silent room. She scrambled forward on her hands and knees, her designer gown tearing against the shattered glass of a broken champagne flute. "Please, take whatever you want. Take the money. Take my jewelry. Just don't hurt him." Conrad sneered, kicking Bianca squarely in the chest, sending her sprawling backward into her injured father. Richard Hayes groaned, clutching his bleeding face, entirely powerless to protect his favored daughter. "Keep your mouth shut, little girl," Conrad spat. "Your money is worthless to me. The codes." I don't have them on me," Gregory sobbed, tears streaming down his face. "They are locked in a biometric vault in the city. I swear." Conrad let out a slow, disappointed sigh. "Wrong answer. Kill the old man first." Two mercenaries stepped forward, raising their rifles toward Richard Hayes. Bianca squeezed her eyes shut, sobbing uncontrollably, waiting for the deafening roar of gunfire that would end her father's life. Instead, a calm, chillingly authoritative voice sliced through the tension of the ballroom. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Every head in the room snapped toward the grand staircase. Abigail stood on the landing, illuminated by the pale moonlight spilling through the skylight. She was no longer the quiet, invisible disappointment her family believed her to be. She held the heavy Spetsnaz assault rifle perfectly leveled at Conrad's chest, her stance immaculate, her expression carved from absolute ice. Bianca gasped, her tear-streaked face contorting in pure confusion. "Abby, what are you doing? Are you insane? Put that down before they kill us all." Richard stared at his youngest daughter, his jaw slack. He had spent his entire life viewing her military career as a phase, a rebellious streak devoid of any real consequence. Yet, watching her now, he felt an unfamiliar chill run down his spine. She did not look like a corporate failure. She looked like the angel of death. Conrad stared at her for a long moment before letting out a harsh, barking laugh. Well, the missing guest. You must be the soldier sister. What are you going to do with that, little girl? You have one gun. I have 10 highly trained operators aiming directly at your heart." It was true. The moment Abigail had spoken, 10 red laser sights painted her dress blues, resting over her chest and forehead. She did not flinch. Her heart rate remained at a steady, perfectly controlled 60 beats per minute. "You don't have highly trained operators," Abigail said, her voice dripping with lethal condescension. "You have poorly disciplined thugs who rely on fear to control unarmed civilians. You failed to secure your perimeter. You failed to maintain comms discipline. And most importantly, you made the fatal mistake of stepping into my grid." Conrad's smile faltered slightly. He gestured sharply to his men. "Shoot her." "Watch her," Abigail said calmly into the open air. "Execute." The world erupted into a symphony of synchronized destruction. Before the mercenaries could even pull their triggers, The massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the ballroom completely disintegrated. The sound was not a roar, but a devastating series of sharp, whip-like cracks. High-caliber sniper rounds, fired simultaneously from 50 distinct vantage points, tore through the night air with terrifying precision. Conrad's men never stood a chance. In less than a second, 8 heavily armored mercenaries simply dropped to the marble floor, neutralized instantly by headshots that completely bypassed their ceramic plating. The sheer kinetic force of the impacts threw their bodies backward, their weapons clattering uselessly to the ground. Conrad froze, his brain utterly incapable of processing the speed and devastation of the strike. He was the only hostile left standing, entirely by Abigail's design. Before he could react, 3 blinding red laser sights appeared perfectly centered on his forehead, and a dozen more painted his chest. "Drop it," Abigail commanded, her voice slicing through the ringing silence of the room. Conrad's hands shook. He looked at the bodies of his elite team, completely eradicated in the blink of an eye. Slowly, deliberately, he unslung his rifle and let it fall to the floor. He raised his hands, his face pale with sudden, overwhelming terror. The low, rhythmic thumping of heavy rotor blades suddenly shook the mansion. 2 massive Black Hawk helicopters descended upon the manicured lawns just outside the shattered terrace doors, their landing lights flooding the ballroom in brilliant, blinding white. Before the skids even touched the grass, dark figures began rappelling from the open side doors. They poured into the ballroom like shadows brought to life. 50 operators, clad in cutting-edge tactical gear, heavy ballistic armor, and advanced night vision optics, stormed the room. They moved with a terrifying, synchronized fluidity, immediately securing the perimeter, checking the downed targets, and forming an impenetrable protective ring around the hostages. These were not regular soldiers. This was Ghost Company, the most feared and highly classified sniper task force in the global military theater. The wealthy guests cowered, screaming and shielding their faces, entirely overwhelmed by the overwhelming display of military dominance. Bianca and Richard remained frozen on the floor, their eyes wide with absolute shock, staring at the terrifying soldiers who had just saved their lives. From the center of the tactical formation, a massive man heavily laden with communications gear and a heavy sniper rifle stepped forward. It was Sergeant Miller. He walked directly past the whimpering Gregory, ignoring the bleeding Richard and the trembling Bianca. He marched straight to the grand staircase, stopping at the base of the steps where Abigail stood. Miller slammed his heavy boots together, the sound echoing sharply in the quiet room. He reached down, unholstering Abigail's custom, engraved sidearm a weapon she had left at the base before the gala. Holding it respectfully in both hands, he slowly lowered his massive frame, dropping heavily to one knee. "Perimeter secure, Commander," Miller said, his deep voice carrying a tone of absolute reverence. "All hostiles neutralized. The property is completely locked down under Ghost Company control. We await your orders, boss." As if triggered by his movement, every single one of the 50 elite snipers in the room turned toward Abigail. In a flawless, synchronized wave of heavy armor and weaponry, all 50 operators dropped to one knee, lowering their rifles toward the floor, in a profound display of ultimate loyalty and respect. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of the helicopter rotors. Bianca's breath hitched in her throat. Her mind desperately tried to reconcile the reality before her. The woman standing on the staircase, the woman commanding a private army of the deadliest killers on Earth, was the same sister she had mocked mere hours ago. She had called her a grunt. She had called her a heavily armed janitor. Now, 50 giants of war were kneeling at her sister's feet, treating her like an absolute god of the battlefield. Richard Hayes stared at his youngest daughter, his corporate empire suddenly feeling incredibly small and utterly insignificant. The power in this room could not be bought. It could not be traded on the stock market. It had been forged in fire, and his daughter was its undisputed master. Abigail descended the staircase slowly, the heavy silence amplifying the sound of her footsteps. She holstered her sidearm and looked down at the kneeling sergeant. "Stand up, Miller," Abigail ordered softly. The 50 soldiers rose in unison, the sound of their gear shifting, echoing like thunder. Abigail walked past her father and her sister, not offering them a single glance of comfort or validation. She stopped directly in front of the terrified Conrad, who was now bound and heavily guarded by two ghost operators. "You thought you were hunting civilians tonight," Abigail said, her eyes locked onto the mercenary leader. "You were wrong. You walked into a trap, and you brought your men to the slaughter." She turned to Miller. "Bag him. Let the intelligence boys tear his mind apart to find out who hired him. I want the local police kept completely out of this perimeter. This is now classified military territory." "Yes, Commander," Miller nodded, gesturing for the guards to drag Conrad away. Abigail finally turned back to look at her family. Bianca was shaking violently, clutching her ruined designer dress, her eyes darting between the terrifying soldiers and her sister. Gregory was hyperventilating, surrounded by operators who looked at him with undisguised disgust. "Abby," Bianca whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her sudden realization. "What? What is this? Who are you?" Abigail stood perfectly straight, adjusting the collar of her dress blues. She looked at her sister, remembering the cruel jokes, the condescension, and the years of being treated as the family disappointment. "I told you, Bianca," Abigail said, her voice perfectly calm and devoid of any familial warmth. "Someone has to do the dirty work. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a debriefing to attend. Try not to embarrass yourselves with the cleanup crew." Without another word, Abigail turned her back on the grand ballroom. She walked out through the shattered glass doors, flanked by her elite guard, stepping into the waiting helicopter and disappearing into the dark, violent night where she truly belonged. Did this intense military family drama keep you on the edge of your seat? If you loved watching arrogance meet ultimate tactical reality, hit that like button and share this story with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, action-packed stories where hidden heroes finally step into the light. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought of Abigail's epic reveal and ring the bell so you never miss an upload.